Hello friends, welcome to Database Academy. So in this video, we will cover the topmost interview questions and answer with theoretical explanation and practical demonstration. Let us start with very first interview questions that may ask like, what is PLSQL? So the PLSQL stands for Procedural Language Extension of the Structured Query Language. So it's a part of SQL only. Second is Oracle uses a PLSQL engine to process the PLSQL statements. So whenever we execute a PLSQL block, all SQL statements will go to the SQL engine and all PLSQL statements will go to the PLSQL engine. That's how the PLSQL block works. PLSQL includes procedural language elements like condition loops. So in the PLSQL block, we can declare variables, we can declare cursor, we can use conditions like if-else condition, we can declare a loop also. So those things we can do inside the PLSQL block. All the statements of a blocks are passed to the Oracle engine at once, which increase the processing speed and decrease the traffic. Next question that interviewer may ask you, like what are the main component of PLSQL block? So the PLSQL block consists of three sections. One is declare sections where we actually declare any variables, write our cursors. Those things we do it at a declaration section. Execution section. This is the execution section where we actually write our business logic. Third is exception handling sections where in case of any runtime error occurs, that will handle in the exception block. Let us see that some example. So this is your declaration section where you declaring a variable. This is your inside begin. This is your executable section where you have where you can write a select statement or your business logic. This is the exception block where we will handle the exceptions which can occur at the runtime. So these are the three main sections of the PLSQL block. Next question that may interviewer can ask like what are the different type of PLSQL block. So we have anonymous block and named block. So anonymous block are unnamed PLSQL block that are not stored in database and are executed directly within a client application or a development environment. Here client application, that means SQL Plus or SQL Developer. They are typically used for debugging tasks, quick scripting or testing purpose. So like here this you can see that this is a anonymous block because this is not saved in our database. This is just we have written for our learning purpose or sometimes we write for some debugging purpose. So that's the use of anonymous block. Next block is named block. So named block are PLSQL block that are given a name stored in a database as a database object. So anything in the PLSQL block, anything in the database which can store with their name like in table, view, triggers, package, procedure, function. So they are the database object that can be saved in a database with their name. So those are named block. Okay, they can be called and execute from other PLSQL block, SQL statement or client application. So those database object which is saved in a database that can be called in a PLSQL block or in any other procedure or function. So named block include store, procedure, function, package, trigger. So they are named block because they all have name and it is stored in our database. Fourth question that interviewer can ask like how to print user defined message on a console. So we have a DBMS output dot put underscore line procedure which can help us to display the message that we want to print. To enable this DBMS output put line, we have to set this set server output on. Then only we can set the any user defined message that we wanted to print on a console. So we have to use this DBMS output dot put underscore line and then user defined message to print that on a console. Let us see that. So this is how we have written that DBMS output put line to print the employee name which we got from the employee table through column ename. Now if we print that, no such employee we are getting, okay, because we don't. Let us try to print with employee name 1. Okay, so you can see that we are able to print that Ramti. So this is printing through using DBMS output put line only. Now let us see the next question. Explain the difference between row type and ampersand type. So row type is used to declare a record that represent a row in a table or a view. It automatically inherits the structure of the specified table or a view. So here you can see that we have declared a variable, and structure of this student table will be automatically assigned to this variable at runtime. Structure, that means all the columns from this student table. Ampersand type, it is used to declare a variable with the same data type as specified database column, variable or constant. So here you can see that this is the another variable, that is student ID. Here we are referring the student ID dot student ID column. So at the runtime, whatever the data type of the student ID will be there, it will automatically assign to this variable. So instead of hardcode data type like a student ID, it is there, then instead of mentioning integer or number here data type, we can mention student dot student ID and ampersand type, which will data type will be automatically assigned to this variable. Now let's see how we can use it. So the requirement is we have to print all the columns from the student table. To print all the columns, we have to create multiple variable for to store each column's value, right? So we have created these many variables to store the columns value from the student table. So student ID, name, age, gender and address. That's how we are writing the declaring the multiple variables to print that one. Now you can see that we are able to print that student ID, name, age and gender and address. So here we have created these many variables these all variables can be replaced with ampersand row type. Here you can see that I have declared only one variable. Here I have mentioned that student ampersand row type. The structure of the student, that means all the columns will be automatically assigned to this variables. Now in this variable we can store all the columns from the student table. Here you can see that we have taken all the columns from the student and storing in one single variable. And now we are printing all this student ID, name, age, gender and address from this variable only. That's the use of student ampersand row type. Now let's execute this. So if we execute this, you can see that both having the same output. So that's the advantage of using a row type. Let us see the ampersand type, how we can use it. So here in this PLSQL block, what I am doing, I am just creating a one simple variable and their data type is varchar 10. See that. Let us print that. So we are able to print the student name, right? Now let us consider that we have a, now let us print this student ID to detail. Now if we print this, we are getting error PLSQL numeric or value error character string buffer 2. So here the issue is student ID 2 name is not able to fit with this student name variable because of the length issue. So here we have to increase that length, maybe 10 or 15, 20 or 15. So let us increase 5 more length. So now we will take it as in 15, clear it, and now we can print that. Now you can see that still we have issue. So now we will increase some more. Now if we print that, we are able to get this record. See, So in this variable, when we are declaring the data type and the length, there may be a issue like the length issue or sometimes data type conversion issue. To avoid such kind of issue, we can directly use the ampersand type, which will dynamically assign the data type of the student name column to this variable. So we don't need to think about what is the data type of the student name, what are the length of these things. This will be automatically assigned at runtime. Now if we print that student ID 2 only data, we are able to print that. Okay, this is how that student ampersand row type and ampersand type will work and help you. So that's the difference between ampersand row type and ampersand type. Let us see the next question that interviewer can ask, like how do you handle exception in PLSQL block. So here you can see that this is a normal PLSQL block. Inside that we have this is declare section, this is executable section, and this was the exception block where we will write all the exceptions. So exceptions in PLSQL are handled using exceptions block. This is called the exception block. It allows catching and handling error that occur during the execution of PLSQL block at runtime. So whenever we execute this PLSQL block, if there is any issue with your executable statement, then you will get an error at runtime in this section. Exception handle can be defined at block level or subprogram level. So these exception block we can write at this block level as well and subprogram level as well. Let us see with example how we can check that. So just consider this, we have a employee table and we having these many rows. Now we have I have declared this variable ename, which is going to hold the employee name, and I have in the exception block I have mentioned too many rows, no data found, and others. Okay, now the just will print one by one and we'll check that how the exception will work. We are trying to print the employee name using employee name Ramti only. Okay, now we are able to print that. Okay, Ramti is the name of the employee. Now consider that I'm just removing T and just wanted to print the Ram data. Now here if we print this, we got many rows found for employee Ram. Because we have handled here in the exception block, you can see the first error was like too many rows. So if we found multiple rows for the employee name Ram, you can see that employee Ram have 2 rows. That's why it was showing like too many rows. Now let us consider when there is how to find no data found. So consider that we are trying to find Ram 1, 2, 3, which I don't think we have a data in our table. So we got a no such employee. So this is printing through no data found. So no data found exception will raise only when we are trying to fetch the record which is not exist in our table. Let us try to print this others. So others is the parent of all the exception. If you have mentioned these exceptions and they are not able to catch that, then it will automatically go to your others exceptions. So let us consider that we have a size issue. So we just having a length is 1 only. Now if we print that, we got error because this error is not related to too many rows or no data. That's why it went to others exception and this exception handled here, and we are printing that error in this block. So that's the exception block and their usage. Next, now let us see the next question. How does a syntax error differ from runtime error? So syntax error occurs during compilation or parsing phase of program before the program is executed. Okay, example of we miss out some semicolon at the end of a statement or mismatch the parenthesis, or undefined variable or function. So let us see there. If we miss out here something, so we will get error SQL command not properly ended. So these are the syntax error. Okay, runtime error. Just now we saw that a runtime error occurs during execution phase of program when a program is running. Runtime error can lead the program termination or unexpected behavior depending on how they are handled by program. So in case any error occur during your execution of your PLSQL block or store procedures, then your entire process will be terminated. That's the difference between syntax error and runtime error. Okay, so now let us see the next question that can be like a difference between function and procedure in PLSQL. So the function must return a single value using return statement. So whenever we create a function, this will must return a single value. That can be a scalar data type. That means number, date, string, varchar, this kind of data type. Procedure doesn't return any value explicitly, but yes, we can get multiple output from this procedure using out parameter, but there is no return keyword using inside the procedure to return some. That's the main difference here. Second is, when calling a function, you can use it in a select statement or a PLSQL code, and it return a value assigned to a variable or used in an expression. So we can use a function in a select statement also and a PLSQL code. But procedure we cannot call it in a select statement. So it can be call it using a PLSQL block, or it can be invoked using call or execute a statement. So basically functions are used to compute and return a single value. So if we have a like complex logic which will compute something and it will return something value, in that scenario we can use these functions. Procedures are typically used to perform some DML operation. So here you can see that I have a function, that function funget sum. So we are sending some 2 parameter as an input. If we are not mentioning any in or out, that means default is in parameter, and we are just adding those 2 variables and returning the value using the return keyword, creating a procedure which will insert some data in a employee table. Here you can see that we are not using any return keyword. Okay, now let us see that how we can execute it. So as I said that function can be used in a select statement. So here we are calling a function and passing 2 parameters because it required 2 parameters, num1 and num2. Now if we execute, we will get the output 30, which is the sum of these 2 variables. Okay, now we'll see that how can we execute procedure. So to execute a procedure, we can use execute, so that it will execute and it will insert some records if there is any DML operation we are performing in a procedure. So now if we check here, we inserted a value for trip 4 times once. So this is the record which inserted using this procedures. Now let us go to the next question. How to declare and use a cursor in a PLSQL. So cursor is a named control structure. That means whenever we declare a cursor, we have to provide the name of this cursor. That's why it is saying that named control structure to retrieve row one at a time from the result set of a SQL query. So you can see that we have declared cursor, and one by one using this loop we are able to fetch the record. It allows processing each row individually for operations such as fetching, updating and deleting. So here in the loop we are fetching the record one by one, and based on our requirement we can perform like any updation, deletion or insertion. Cursor are declared using cursor declaration. So here you can see that cursor keyword is used to declare a cursor. They are open, fetch, close using appropriate statement. So to work with cursor, we have to use first open cursor, then we have to use fetch cursor, and then we have to close the cursor. Okay, so this is how we can work with the cursor. These are the three main important keyword is used while working with the cursor. Cursor can be explicit controlled using fetch and close statement, implicitly controlled using for loop. So to control and work with your cursor data, we can use this loop or for loop also to work with your data. Now let's see the next question, that can be a difference between implicit and explicit cursor. So implicit cursor is something which declare internally by Oracle. We don't need to write a cursor name, open, fetch and close. It will manage automatically. That's why it is saying that automatically manage. Limited functionality, because this implicit cursor will always return a single row, so they are not suitable for more complex query and scenario based, where you need to more control over the cursor operation. So that's why they have a limited functionality. We cannot write our own logic here. Automated operation. So because implicit cursor is handled by the Oracle, so we don't need to take care about the open, close and fetch, those things. So that's the use of implicit cursor. Let's see the explicit cursor. Explicit cursor, that is defined by the user. So we will have some declaration of the cursor. We will have some names, and we have all the control like open, fetch and close, these kind of things. We have full control of the over the cursor, suitable for complex query. So if we have to work with complex query and based on the rows, we have to do some complex logic, that we can use it using this explicit cursor. So more control with explicit cursor. You have control over the cursor operations such as opening, fetching, closing. You can also define parameter and use them cursor to declaration. So we have these many controls in a cursor that we can use it. Okay, so here we have cursors and we have a control, like we can add where conditions, we can pass some parameters also, we can open, fetch and close this. So these all controlling feature we have with the explicit cursor, which is not there in the implicit cursor. Next question is, what are the different type of cursor attributes? So when we work with cursor, there are predefined attributes given by the Oracle that can be useful when you work with the cursor. So let us see what are the cursor attributes. So cursor attributes are a special attribute that provide information about the status of cursor, okay, or the row fetch by cursor. So first is like %found. So this attribute return true if the most recent fetch operation successfully retrieve a row from the cursor, and false if no row was fetched or if the fetch operation failed. Okay, so if we want to check that whether we have found some data and it is cursor is still active, which is returning some values, so we can use this cursor name %found. So if it is found and it is returning something, we can write our business logic here. If it is not found, like if it is returning false, then we can do something else. Just opposite of %found, not found, we have another cursor attribute which can be used. This will return true if the most recent fetch operation did not retrieve any row. So if your cursor is not returned any row, this not found will return you true. If that is returning more rows, then it will return false. That's how we can use these two attributes. Now let's see the another attributes, %row count. This attribute return the number of rows that have been fetched from the cursor so far. So this row count will give you the number of rows that cursor has fetched so far. We can use this kind of condition like cursor %row count greater than 0. Then we can write our business logic, else we can do something. Next attribute is %is open. So this attribute return true if the cursor is already open. So if we are trying to open any cursor which is already open, so before opening this any cursor, we can use this attribute. We can use this cursor attributes to know about whether the cursor is already open and it is being used. Okay, so this how we can avoid some exceptions. Okay, this is like another scenario where you can mention like cursor ampersand is open, then cursor is open and cursor is closed. Next question may be asked like what are the different type of cursor exceptions. So cursor exceptions, that means implicit cursor, we can get some kind of exceptions also which is related to cursor only. So cursor is already open. As I said previously, is open, we have an attribute which can be used to avoid this kind of error. So cursor had already open, raise when trying to open a cursor, that is already open. So before opening any cursor, we should use that is open attributes and this will return true if that is already open. Invalid cursor, raise when attempt to perform operation on an invalid or closed cursor. So if that cursor is already closed and we are trying to fetch and do some, and we are trying to fetch that data from that cursor, we will get a invalid. Now let us see the next question, that can be a what is trigger in PLSQL. So a trigger is a named block of the code that is associated with a specific database table and automatically executed. Because trigger is having a name and it's saved in a database as an object, that's why it's called a named block. So whenever we perform any insert, update or delete operation on an associated table, that trigger will automatically execute. So triggers are used to enforce a business rule, maintain data integrity and implement data validation. Triggers are widely used in database application for various purposes, including auditing, logging, data replication and enforcing complex constraints. So these are the use of the database triggers which we can use it. Here you can see that whenever we perform any DML operations in any kind of table, that trigger will get fired based on the event insert, update or delete, and this will get executed here in our database. Now let's see the next question. What are the different type of triggers? So basically we have a row level trigger, statement level trigger, compound trigger and instead of trigger. So before insert and after insert, they are the events associated with the triggers. Row level trigger is a type of trigger in Oracle database that fires once for each row affected by triggering event. These triggers are associated with a specific table, are executed for each row, that is insert, update, delete in a table. Row level trigger allow developer to perform action or enforce rule on a per row basis. So whenever we declare any row level trigger, we have to use this for each row. And this kind of trigger will execute for each row which is affected by your transactions. Statement level triggers, unlike row level trigger which execute once for each affected row, statement level trigger execute once for entire triggering event, regardless of whether it affect one or multiple rows. So if we are updating 10 records from an employee table, so this statement level trigger will execute only once, but row level trigger will execute 10 times. That's the difference between both of them. Next is compound trigger. These kind of triggers can be created on a table level or a view level also. So this is basically we use compound trigger to avoid mutating table error. Okay, so this is a different type of error. Next is instead of trigger. So instead of DML trigger is a DML trigger created on a non-editing view, and instead of triggering is always a row level trigger. This trigger can be read old new value but cannot change them, and here we cannot change the old and new value. So that's the all type of different type of triggers that we have. Now let us see the how to set the execution of trigger. So let's say consider that you have a table employee and you have before insert you have 3 triggers on that on same event before insert. So and you want to set that trigger 1 should execute first, then trigger 2 should execute first, and then trigger 3 should execute. How can we do this? So we can do this in Oracle database using follows command. So here you can see that while creating trigger 1, we say that follows trigger 2 and trigger 3. So trigger 1 will execute first, then trigger 2 and then trigger 3 will execute if we have a similar event on a table. So here you can see that you can control the order of trigger execution by specifying the firing order explicitly using follows or precedes clause. So follows clause specify that trigger being defined should execute after the specified trigger have executed. So here you can see that once this is executed, then only 2 and 3 will execute. Precedes clause specified that the triggers being defined should execute before the specified trigger have been executed. So here you can see that we have created a trigger 2, but before executing trigger 2, trigger 1 will execute. That's how we can use follows or precede keyword to set this sequence of a trigger. So that's the end of this video. Hope you have learned something new in this video, and please subscribe my channel if you are new to this channel, and if you wanted to learn something new features from the SQL and PLSQL, you can subscribe my channel. So if you have not seen my previous 2 interview questions and answer with SQL and PLSQL, I'll recommend you to please go and watch these videos. It will help you to clear your interview. Thank you so much for watching.